Welcome to the Sleeping Barber podcast.
So what happens is they're defaulting to a competitor who's easier to find and buy from. Maybe the buyer actually would prefer you, but you made it too hard. And in B2B buying is already hard enough. So people pass the path of least resistance, and it's incredibly common and it's expensive.
Welcome to the Sleeping Barber podcast, a place for business leaders to get the best and most credible information on marketing, strategy, and innovation. Your hosts, Mark Binkley and Vasilis Douros, share their experiences as they gather insights from the world's leading experts. Now, on with the show.
And just before we get started with this episode, V and I would love for the show to be super valuable to you. So if you could rate the podcast, leave a review, leave some feedback about who you'd like to hear about or the topics that are really important to you, that'd be great.
Hey, welcome back to the Sleeping Barber podcast. And today we have an incredible guest to cover some research that was just recently released. Your brand has 60% aided awareness in your category. Buyers know you exist, they consider you, but when they're ready to buy, they're not at the trade shows that they attend. You're not on the review sites that they check. Your sales team doesn't cover the region. Your product portfolio is confusing. Let's just call it a mess. It's just a mess. You built mental availability, but you forgot to unlock the door. That's the easiest way to make that concise. Now, most B2B marketers don't even realize that this is their problem to solve. They think distribution is a sales issue. Channel strategy belongs to operations. Product portfolio, well, that's product's job. Meanwhile, their competitors are showing up everywhere buyers look. Today, I, Heath, and the B2B Institute are here to talk about a report released with Aaron Bergen-Bass that argues physical availability is marketing's responsibility, not sales. Welcome back to the show, Ty.
Thanks for having me. And that was a great intro. I feel like I should have been like, womp womp, but we're going to turn that. We want the brands to be findable. So I'm excited. 100%. Thanks for having me back.
No, this is great. Ty is the director and co-founder of the B2B Institute at LinkedIn. She's a brand expert, a digital creator, and a keynote speaker. Also a really close friend of the show. You know, we love Ty around here. She's definitely on a mission to make marketing science more accessible and actionable, but has also served as a board member on the American Advertising Federation. She's an advisor for Digital Marketing Institute and an Adobe insider. Is there anything else we can add there, Ty? Like, that list is long.
Oh my gosh. I mean, underscore that I'm on a mission to build famous brands and really want to take the complex information and make it easily understandable. There's a lot to cover.
There is. Yeah, and it can be daunting for marketers to think about the ecosystem as a whole and actually where the responsibilities start and finish sometimes, because it's very easy to sit in your own echo chamber and just your own box. This is what I think I'm responsible for. But, you know, sometimes it's those images that, you know, from marketing land, from Mark Ritson, that shows like actually marketing as a holistic ecosystem. And you see, actually marketing's evolved everywhere. But I don't think many realize that.
Right. It's evolving fast. There's a lot to know, but I think there's like foundational principles. Like one of the things we always love to like index on is this idea of durable ideas, or understanding what's not changing, what's foundational that you can bet on for the long term. We're obsessed with mental models. We also love the concept of thinking deterministically versus probabilistically. Like when you know something's going to happen, you invest in it with precision. When you're not sure, you have to think in probability. So there are a lot of different ways for marketers to sort of digest all of the change. But I love those two in particular. What's not changing, and then what can you focus on with precision, and then what do you need to think about in terms of a range of different outcomes. So that's how we try to make it. We try to break it down over here.
No, I love that. So the interview, we've kind of sectioned off into 4 core sections. And the first one is really talking about like setting up the missing half. Because I think this is kind of one of the most important areas that we need to dive into. And the first question that we had prepared here for you is the idea of physical availability. You know, at first blush, that would seem at an odd place for a B2B institute to get involved because it's not a traditional marketing lane. Now, what is the B2B Institute's interest in this?
Yeah. So just to tell a little bit about background on the work and how it came to be with the Ehrenberg Bass Institute, who's been studying how brands actually grow over 50 years, like real purchasing data across categories. We wanted to take this physical availability framework, which was originally developed for B2C, and think about how it applies to B2B buying behavior. So this is work that existed, but we want to take it to our lens. And it's evidence-based, it's patterns that hold true, they're rooted in human memory and how buying behavior actually works. So that's a little bit of background. But the question you asked is, why would we get involved here? That's the heart of what we're trying to do at the B2B Institute. So our mission has always been about how do B2B brands grow? And the evidence is clear. You grow by getting more customers. And that means you need to have the two parts of that formula working together. Mental availability, which is what we've been talking about for a long time. So that's being easily thought about in buying situations. But the piece that we haven't talked about as much is physical availability, which is about being easy to find and buy when someone's ready to act. So we've been laser focused on mental availability for some time, distinctive assets, category entry points. We're not dropping that. That's beautiful, necessary, but we want to continue to push the industry forward, want to challenge existing thinking. And when we looked at that data from our partners at Ehrenberg Bass, we saw this massive gap. And the gap is this: B2B brands typically show up in only 3 to 4 channels. And then buyers are actually engaging with an average of 32 touch points across the journey. So that to us represents a huge disconnect. And that's why this physical availability work is actually aligned with the mission. We want people to take that mental availability and turn it into actual sales. And that's why we can't leave that to someone else to solve. It's actually marketing's problem to solve, not sales alone and not product alone, but together, we need to figure out how we get there.
Yeah, I absolutely love that.
Yes, I'm super interested in all the people that you had collaborating on this. I've written a report once recently, and it was hard enough with a couple people, but there's like an army of brilliant thinkers that have joined you on this, and I just wanted to know like some of the rationale behind that, and what that experience was like.
For sure. Yeah, the more the merrier,
Yeah.
No, seriously. At the B2B Institute, we have this concept called genius. And I didn't coin the term. It was actually a term coined by a gentleman named Brian Eno. It's a combination between the word scene and genius. But simply put, it's this idea that genius doesn't happen in isolation. It happens when people from different perspectives come together and bring their brilliance to a shared problem. And felt that physical availability in B2B is exactly the type of problem that benefit from having multiple lenses. So, I mean, of course, within Ehrenberg Bass, we've got Professor Jenny Romanuk, we've got Professor Magda Nenich-Thiel. They are the world's leading authorities on how brands grow. And Professor Magda, she actually came up with the Presence Prominence portfolio piece.
I didn't. Oh, cool.
Yes. And then, of course, we know Jenny Romaniak is the world's authority on how brands grow. So, but we also needed the other side of the coin, which is like real life practitioner perspective, right? Because like, frankly, it touches so many different parts of the organization: sales, product, finance, operations. So we brought in practitioners like Frank Cooper from Visa, Tom Stein from Stein IAS, and leaders who are actually wrestling with these challenges every day. Because we could talk about it from like an academic rigor perspective, but I think it's important that we pressure test the ideas against people, real budgets, politics, and all the things that we have to navigate. And so if you do that, because you don't want to just talk like theoretically, here's how it works. If you can do that, you have something that's both intellectually rigorous and also actionable on the other side.
Yeah, that's great. And it reads like that too. Like it does come across as not just an academic thing, but it's a much more, it's challenging for sure. I think some of the concepts in there, but it's definitely rooted in real business applications and scenarios, it feels like.
I'm glad it showed up that way for you.
Yeah.
That's a goal.
Yeah.
What I loved most about this is like the contrarian nature, some of the contrarian ideas that really kind of came out of this report. And, the biggest one I would argue is that, decisions about where to sell should be marketing's role. And that is a bold statement, especially in most B2B orgs where sales owns those channels. Why should marketing control this?
I'm like, everyone breathe. It's okay.
Yeah. Honestly,
your
I've
lunch.
seen people lose their minds over stuff like this.
No. So it is bold. It is bold. And I want to be clear. We're not saying that marketing should like go off in a corner and like make those decisions in a vacuum. What I'm saying is that marketers have agency and we should be at the table and often leading the conversations because it's a growth decision. It's not just a sales execution decision. So here's some perspective. If you think about a salesperson or a product team, neither of them have a full customer view on their own. So sales, they have quarterly targets. They're optimizing for as we talk about in-market buyer, the 5% of buyers who are in market now. And their role, their brilliance is at closing deals with people who are ready to buy today. But as we know with the 95-5 rule, what about the 95%? Who represent future revenue? Those buyers are not talking to sales yet. So we know they're doing research, they're going to events, they're consuming content, they're tapping their network, but they're not in market. And then let's talk about product. So product, their focus is features, functionality, technical problems, essential, but they're not typically focused on like which buying situations trigger demand for the category. Distinctive assets need to show up across these touch points. So that brings it back to marketing. Marketing is the only function with visibility across that entire customer journey from the moment the buying situation first triggers to the moment they sign the contract. But we haven't had visibility into that back half of things as much as we should. So this conversation is like critically for marketers to be more accountable for the ROI on those brand investments we're making. We're meaning marketers should bring customer insight, channel duplication, data, brand strategy, and then partner with sales. So again, like going back, we're not trying to start a turf war here. It's really...
All B2B really, needs is another turf war.
B2B turf war. No, it's about putting something with...
I just having
I love that.
Flashbacks to me. Situations I've been in before, like, and another thing, I want to take over.
Oh my God.
Yeah, you can only imagine.
But yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully
that does make sense.
It does. There was like this, just as you were saying that, there was an aha that happened for me where the promise to the customer research, to me, just all of a sudden became so much more relevant. Like we've always said, like when B and I have talked about that research, we've always talked about like make a promise, deliver, and like the rest of the business needs to be super supportive on deliver. But the way you just described the CEPs and the way the products are designed and matching that, like, and then the availability of the channels to get into market, like I never really, it's so much clearer the way you described it. I'm doing a terrible job at describing it, but there's a connection there on the promise of the customer research on how to get to market, not just that we're putting messages into market.
Yeah, we're working with people. I mean, it is as much like delivering on, like being trustworthy, delivering on what you stand for. How do you create a culture where people are actually talking to each other and where people all see themselves as having a part in the ultimate delivery? How do we win together? So it's both like the technical aspects of it, but it's also the very real, like, how do we team at this thing? Right?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Speaking of teaming, there's 3 different components of physical availability. Do you mind just describing those a little bit so we can dig into each one of them a little bit more?
And now a short word from our sponsor. This episode was sponsored by Quadical. Did I say that right? Quadical?
You did. Quadical. Yeah.
Quadical. Mark, what is it?
Well, V, I'm glad you asked. Quadical is my own company, actually. So, I'm the Sleeping Barber podcast co-host with you, but I also have my own company. And so I'm happy to sponsor the Sleeping Barber podcast.
Love
part
that.
because I give so much time to it. But Quadical is a fractional marketing leadership firm where we specialize in evidence-based marketing. And we do consulting work for companies typically between $30 to $300 million, and helping them navigate some of the challenges that people have, like, I know something's broken, but I'm not quite sure how to fix it, nor do I have the time to fix it.
Fair.
And so that's where we help out a lot of people.
Well, I'll speak for Mark as well, because you're wearing your Quadical hat right now. We appreciate your sponsorship of the Sleeping Barber podcast. And for all those that may be interested, we do have a whole bunch of sponsorship options. Always looking to bring on new sponsors. We have a lot of creative ideas that can really help across a global audience.
Thanks, Heath.
No, thank you, Quadical. We appreciate your business.
And now back to the show.
Absolutely. So this framework again comes from Ehrenberg Bass, and it's beautifully simple. We like things that are simple and digestible. 3 P's: presence, prominence, and portfolio. So I'll just walk through each one. Presence is about being where buying happens. So the best way to think about it is like, imagine a grocery store. If you walk up to the shelf in B2C, that's your shelf space. In B2B, it's a little bit more complex, because you've got sales coverage, channel partnerships, trade shows, whether you're showing up in all these digital environments where buyers are actually doing research. And, each channel is largely selling to the same types of customers. So the goal isn't finding like a magical niche. It's about how do you maximize reach where your buyers are actually surfacing. And then moving to prominence, that's about how you stand out in the channel. So we've talked about this to some degree in our Better, Bolder branding research. And basically what it says is it's not enough to be present. You also have to be noticed. And so this is like where distinctive brand assets become really critical. Like if you go to the grocery store, prominence might be like the eye level placement or like the end cap display. But in B2B, it's about owning those distinctive visual, verbal cues that make you recognizable. So on LinkedIn, at events, in review sites, if a buyer searches for cybersecurity solutions and gets 10 results, what makes them actually click on you? That's prominence. And then portfolio, which I'm excited to talk about because I think it's actually a game-changing piece for folks to think about. But it's about having the right products. It's about making them easy to find and buy. So it's like the merchandising layer. So imagine like a B2B website, like everyone's like thinking like the buttons and things like that. Most of these websites are organized by product categories and tech specs, but buyers aren't thinking that way. So this goes back to category entry points. Buyers are thinking by buying situations. They're saying, I need to solve this problem. So portfolio strategy means like, how do you declutter your offering so it's not overwhelming? How do you focus on hero products that drive the most revenue? I really like, everyone kind of maybe remembers Marie Kondo. Getting rid of that don't spark joy. We need to like Marie Kondo our portfolio so it's more clear. So all of these elements work together, and you don't win with one or two. Like you need presence in the right channels, prominence makes you stand out, and a portfolio that's like really easily shoppable.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
The prominence one, sorry, I just want to dig into that for a sec, because there's probably, like, for as many, I imagine decks become a part of prominence because or reports or something like, but like from a internal process of making a choice and decision, there's 20-ish maybe, depending on the size of the company and the size of the deal, decision makers. And so then these decks get shared internally. So is that also a form of prominence, like that, like a deck that you might share with somebody internally, and then whether or not there's consistency, whether I share it with this person that looks the same as that person?
Yeah, I think that is absolutely an element of it, because you imagine like every single time someone is exposed to your brand internally or externally, that is an opportunity to build memory and for people to start to associate your message with the distinctive assets that you're investing in. So be thinking about how you're maintaining that consistency internally will definitely take that same discipline externally for sure.
Interesting.
Similar to, I guess, This one is not as contrarian, but I've been meaning to ask this, because it can be a little bit. But you write in the report that neither sales reps nor product teams have full customer view. I think where we're challenged a little bit is technically, doesn't sales talk to the customer really every day? What is it that they're missing and marketing does see instead?
So yes, sales does talk to customers every day, and that's customer relationship is super valuable. But again, they're talking to people who are in market. So they're having conversations with people who've already entered the buying journey to some degree. And those people already have a short list of brands that they're thinking about. So again, what they're not seeing is the vast majority of future customers. Those folks are not taking sales calls. They're not filling out demo forms, but they are starting to form impressions, and they're starting to build the memory structures that we just talked about a second ago. They're starting to connect your brand to the solutions. They're seeing ads, they're reading reports, they're talking to peers. So they're doing all of that stuff, and marketers actually see all of that. We have that data on which channels, which buying situations trigger. Sales tends to be regionally focused. So an example, let's say you have a sales rep in the Northeast, they're optimized for their territory, their accounts, their quota. Mm-hmm. They're not thinking about how should we invest in EMEA? They're not thinking about do we need a different channel strategy for SMB versus enterprise, right? Mm-hmm. So there's some blind spots.
Yeah.
There.
You're blowing my mind right now, Ty.
You could tell he has a question.
No, it's not more. It's more just an aha again, because we're essentially saying this is not essentially saying this. The reps themselves, as a former sales guy, I essentially am a last click attribution model.
Your search.
That's not a bad way to think about it. Actually, marketing connects the dots.
Yeah.
We see the map, zoomed out, the full system, how presence affects brand reach, how prominence impacts consideration, how the complexity or simplicity helps or hinders conversion. And that's I like the way you put that. I mean, but it is it's the holistic view is what makes marketing the function, sort of maybe quarterback. Everyone has a role to play.
Totally. Yeah. It's not it's not that it's not important. It's just that it's not the whole picture. And as a salesperson, I wouldn't focus on future demand because I don't get paid for that.
No, that's a fair point.
Right.
Okay. So
I love track and field. It's a relay. It's a, Wait, but is that the right one? Because we need someone that's maybe it's the coach is the marketing. I don't know. It's something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
You guys both threw me though. You both threw me because in the back I've been writing notes here, and the first one that came to mind is for a title, another B2B turf war is where I was going. And then Mark, you came out with sales is the last click attribution of B2B. Now I have to decide what's the title of this episode. What is it going to be?
Yeah, sorry. I just,
anyways.
I can't wait to see what title you come up with. Whatever it is, it's going to be great.
All right. Just before we move into section 2 here, where we talk about the 3 levers a little more detail, I just want to wrap up with, can you give us a real example of where a brand had a strong mental availability, but a really weak physical availability, and what it actually cost them?
Yeah. So, that happens more than you think. And the frustrating thing is there are a lot of brands that do so much right on the mental availability side, which is why we wanted to do this study with Ehrenberg Bass. And so I'll just describe a pattern. So a B2B brands invest heavily in brand building, they're running great campaigns. This is kind of how you opened, you run distinctive assets, you're showing up consistently, strong aided awareness, but then when the person's ready to purchase, the brand isn't where they're looking. Mm-hmm. They're not at the trade show. Their product portfolio is so confusing. People are wait, how do I find this on the website? And they can't figure out, we've all been there. What is the actual solution that meets my needs? So what that frustration leads to is defaulting to a competitor with just just clearer merchandising. So, I mean, we know from the mental availability side of things that buyers typically only have 2.4 brands on their consideration set by day one of that purchase journey. So you've done all that work to build mental availability. But if you're not also working on the other side to be physically present, you're invisible. You don't even get a chance to compete. And so what happens then is you're funding your competitors' growth.
Right.
It's creating demand that then someone else captures. And I love analogies. I mean, you're planting the seeds. Competitors are harvesting them. Just because they've got better physical availability. I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to name names. But I have some examples of folks that are doing quite well across the P's, which I think we'll get to in the conversation. But that's why we call physical availability the missing half, because it's not enough to be easy to think of. You also have to be easy to find and buy. They both work together.
So let's get into the P's then. The presence P. There was a duplication channel matrix that you had published in the report. And then there's recommendations around how brands should think about omni-channel strategy. I just wonder if you could kind of talk a little bit about the channel matrix, what it was, and then how that influences strategy.
Yeah. So everyone definitely check this out. The duplication matrix is fascinating because I think it destroys one of the most persistent myths in B2B. And it's this idea that different channels reach completely different audiences. So what the channel is, and the data that you can see when you look at it actually shows is that there are small specialist channels that rarely deliver unique buyers. So if you think about it this way, if you're present on LinkedIn, but you're also at trade shows, you're largely reaching the same people across both channels. So every channel selling to the same types of customers. Now that might sound discouraging, but I think it's actually liberating because it changes how you should think about channel strategy. So instead of like a magical niche that gives you exclusive access, your goal should be maximizing reach across the channels where your buyers are spending time. So it's more about coverage versus exclusivity. And the more channels you're present in, the more buying situations you actually are then able to intercept. And also the more often you're refreshing memory with buyers at different stages of that journey. So that also means you have to think about how your channels work together and not competing for budget. So an example, like a buyer might see your LinkedIn ad, then encounter you at a trade show, and then find you in organic search, and then see a case study. So you're thinking about the constellation. Each touch point is reinforcing the others. So what you might do is audit where you're present, where buyers are actually spending time, versus where your buyers are actually spending time. So most of the brands that do this type of work are comfortable in 3 to 4 channels. But again, as I said earlier, buyers are engaging in 32 touch points. That's massive white space that their competitors are filling.
Yeah. You also mentioned that events are ubiquitous but undervalued all in the same time. And then the data goes on to support that 96% of B2B marketers rate in-person events as most effective for direct sales. Yet most brands treat them as one-offs. Where do you think the disconnect is happening there?
Yeah, so this is actually another one of my favorite findings in the report because it's a clear opportunity that a lot of brands are missing. So, 96% of B2B marketers say in-person events are most effective for direct sales. So that's almost unanimous, right?
And
yet,
close as it can be.
It's as close as it can be. Everyone's like, it worked. And yet most brands treat events like isolated moments. So we've all seen, we all have done this, seen this. You show up for 3 days, you work the booth, you collect the business cards, and then you're like, bye-bye, and you move on to the next event. So there's not we're not thinking, about long-term strategy when it comes to events. There's not the content capture that could be happening. There's not an amplification plan. And so the disconnect is that marketers are thinking about events as sales activation and not as part of the brand building infrastructure.
Right.
Budgets are tight, improving ROI matters more than ever. So I get where that mindset's coming from, but we are leaving value on the table. That's why LinkedIn is investing in the LinkedIn events product to make it easier for people to do that and get visibility to like how it's getting delivered. But let me share about what a smart brand in taking this on might do.
Yeah.
They're thinking upfront about content capture. They're thinking about digital amplification. They are already planning. They know they're going to do that, have that keynote speech. They know they're going to record that. They're going to turn it into 10 LinkedIn posts, 3 blog articles. They're going to get clips for sales enablement. They're getting material for nurture campaigns, the panels. That's going to show up on the podcast. They're going to do live podcasts like you do. They're going to take that week of event presence and they're going to turn it into 52 weeks of distributed content. So they're getting maximum value. And like, I think the other thing to point out that a lot of brands miss is that they think about events as being for the people in the room, but like, it's not just for the people in the room. Events signal credibility. So, being a sponsor, having a keynote slot, hosting a private dinner, these are also prominent signals that buyers show up and they notice, even if they didn't attend, it affects how you're showing up in their mental landscape. So big opportunity to capture and amplify the content you're creating around events.
I keep coming back to this last click sales attribution when everything is, but if you, because I've been there too, usually the question is, well, how many leads did we get? And it's not necessarily the right question because it's that idea of like, if all you have is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. Like if you go into an event like that with just the mindset of, we only need to get leads and the only purpose of this is to get leads, then you're misrepresenting the purpose of the full value of an event.
100%. 100%. Yeah, there's so much more to it, especially given the investment that goes into these events.
Yeah,
right.
We all get bigger when it comes to it.
Yeah, that's wild. Okay, so when you were talking about covering channels that contribute to, you say brands cover the channels that contribute to revenue first, and it sounds obvious, but there's something around what B2B companies are not looking at when they're making channel decisions that you kind of pointed to in the report. I wanted to see if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this is where a lot of B2B companies are flying blind, and it is costly to be flying blind. And so, there's the obvious data that they're looking at, and that's like which channels are driving pipeline, which drive closed won revenue, what channels have the best conversion rates. That's table stakes. But there's stuff that we are not looking at in B2B, and that might be channel reach. So how many buyers in your total addressable market are actually reachable through each channel? So you might love a channel because it converts well, but if it only reaches 10% of your TAM, you're capping your growth potential. You need to know what is the maximum penetration I can achieve through my channel mix. So that's number one. Number two is duplication data. So which channels are reaching same buyers versus incremental reach? So that's the channel duplication mix I mentioned earlier, and most companies aren't measuring that. So they're assuming like every channel is additive, but if 3 channels are reaching same audience, you're not expanding reach or increasing frequency, which might be fine, but just be aware of what you're doing. And then the third is like the buying situation mapping. So what triggers demand? What channels do buyers trust in those situations? So if the buying situation is like we need to comply with regulations, buyers will tap their trusted advice, do some searches, go to analyst sites. If you're not present in that sequence, you're missing the journey. And then there's competitive presence data. So you know where your competitors are. And more importantly, where are they not? Because sometimes the opportunities are the ones your competitors have neglected, but you can't make that choice if you don't know where they are. So we have to move from making decisions on what's comfortable or what sales likes or what we've always done, because we need to look at where the growth opportunities live.
So many things. I like vividly remember looking at pipelines and looking at sources of leads by pipeline. pipeline by sources of leads. So marketing sourced revenue or deals, own source revenue deals, and then referral. Let's call it. Own being the sales team. And usually what we have is like this bigger, for argument's sake, let's call it a bigger funnel on the lots more leads coming in through the marketing side, but lower conversion rates. And then then in terms of activity, very little activity on the sales side in terms of deals coming in, but slightly higher conversion rates. But usually the most profitable source is referrals from, say, partners or whatever the case might be, and really, really high conversion rates. So you look at that and you go, okay, well, let's just do more referrals. But then you're missing out on the opportunity to build the awareness you need to get more people into the funnel, into the future, and build a future demand. Because the sales teams are always going to go towards, myself included, the lowest or the lowest hanging fruit, which is not, again, going at the bigger market and looking at the TAM and trying to find ways to expand your market share. So then you're stuck in the situation where you're just ending up getting what you deserve because your market share.
Yeah. More. Yeah. I'm with you. You know, you could have more fruit growing, bigger trunk, stronger tree.
There's a race in here somewhere.
No, I love it. More leaves. I don't, more different branches. That's like, yeah.
Okay. On that note, there's this idea around too with ads. I think you were one of the first people we talked to about this idea way back when. But some ads are not actually ads, and so some ads like paid search are more like wayfinders. And so in addition to channels not all being equal, and so there's reach opportunities with different channels, there's also like a type of media that we have to think about. I don't want to call it quality, but there's a difference in terms of the way that people use channels in B2B and B2C. And so I wanted to see if you could talk about, like, for specifically search, if you could talk a little bit about that and what's the implications of those differences?
Yeah. Now, are you talking about in the sense of like prominence?
Well, I guess it's part prominence. It kind of blends, I think, because for me, prominence would be showing up and being a wayfinder, if I'm understanding it correctly, and being consistent. The presence part, I think this is where it blurs. Like, you're trying to create presence. And so while you think you might be creating presence, you might be doing more prominence just because of the channel.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think what there is to talk about here is like how B2B builds prominence through paid search, and then also like how that shows up and how you might think about it in the realm of like what's happening with search right now. I don't help, like, if I'm not understanding your question, like, help me out there. But I think part of what there is to understand is that when people are doing paid search, they're actually renting prominence.
Yeah.
And, we want to start also thinking about owned prominence, because rented prominence can be expensive and fragile, where owned prominence actually compounds over time. So rented prominence is this idea of like you're paying for visibility, but the moment you stop paying, the visibility disappears. So they're all critical channels. So you want to think about like absolutely investing in them, but remember that you are renting shelf space as well. Owned prominence is about building assets and presence that gives you visibility. And that includes things like, going back to what we were talking about before, it's your, like, both thinking about presence and prominence, it's your distinctive brand assets. Shows up in results, in our analyst posts, in news coverage, customer conversations. When someone searches for your category and your brand appears in the organic results because you've built authority, that's owned prominence. Your presence on review sites like G2 or Gartner Peer Insights. So yes, there might be some cost there, but once you've built a strong review profile, now you're generating consistent visibility and credibility as well. Yeah. So, your owned content ranking for important search queries is also a plus. So It's your capacity to publish definitive guides, research reports, tools, and resources that then rank or maybe are findable now through LLMs cited through, GEO, which is hot topic right now. But it's also, speaking slots at industry events, podcast appearances, contributed articles, especially on Sleeping Barber, right? So
shameless plug.
Shameless plug. I mean, so these are the types of things that build your presence in environments where buyers are spending time, but it augments your investment in you're already making in rented prominence, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you touched on GEO, or generative engine optimization there. And I think it's important that we take a moment, just kind of highlight that, because I think what we're seeing, research suggests that brands without those strong distinctive assets are kind of being written off in these environments, and especially in those typical buying journeys where people are researching. If you don't mind, take a moment, explain what you mean that a lot of B2B marketers don't realize how big this is going to be. And when you're not showing up in these frictionless environments now, it will become more difficult for you.
Yeah, this is I said it's a hot topic, but it's actually probably the most urgent thing I'll say in this conversation today.
Yeah.
Because the stakes are high and most B2B marketers aren't paying attention yet.
Yeah.
So here's what's happening. So buyers are increasingly using AI tools. So ChatGPT, Perplexity, Copilot, and others to do research and get recommendations. And when they're doing that, they're asking questions like, what are the best CRM platforms for companies, right?
Yeah.
And AI is then generating a summary. Maybe there are 3 to 5 different brand recommendations. And so if your brand does not have strong, distinctive assets that are referenced across the web, you're not making it into those summaries. The AI is synthesizing from what it can find. And if your brand isn't memorable there, then you're invisible. And so that's where
I agree.
We need to right now start thinking about generative engine optimization. And that is actually reshaping B2B buying, because unlike traditional search, where you'll show up on like page 2 or 3, or maybe AI summaries, there's no page 2. If you're not in the summary, you're not there. So this work, thinking about distinctive brand assets is more important. What you can do is have more consistent visual cues, going back to what you said earlier, Mark. You were talking about like consistent branding. Verbal cues, brand colors, terminology that shows up everywhere, website case studies, reviews, things like that. Those assets need to be so distinctive that when they're it's unambiguous which brand is being discussed. So generic brands, the ones with forgettable names, stock photography, corporate speak, they will get written out of the buying journey because there's nothing distinctive for the AI to latch onto.
Yeah.
And so the urgency I'm pointing out is like, this is happening like right now. We're using the tools. Right? Buyers are using the tools. And if you wait another year to invest in distinctive assets, you will have lost a year of presence in the environments that are shaping these future decisions. So we need to be memorable. We need to be distinct. In the presentation, we talk about this. We actually have this thing where you can pick out your child in a crowd or a kid in a crowd wearing a red backpack, right? Right. So we want to wear our red backpack.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
We don't want to be invisible to humans and AI.
Yeah, I love that.
Okay, so that leads me to the next question I wanted to ask about. When we're thinking about what does all this mean and how do we apply it? You talked about earlier there's 2.4 products, or when top of mind products or brands that come to mind at the beginning of a buyer journey. So how do we use this, the GEO part, the own prominence, the rented, like all of that to really have a better chance of winning when we're trying to build consideration for the brands that we're in?
Yeah. So, I mean, it should change how we think about timing and investment. So if buyers are showing up on day one and they already have 2 to 3 brands in mind, that means that that consideration battle was won or lost long before this formal purchase journey even started. So those brands got onto that short list through months or years of like consistent presence. What they did well is they built up their mental availability through distinctive assets. They showed up in the right buying situations. They refreshed memory. But here's what it means practically. Like, we cannot wait until someone's in market to start building the brand. I know you've talked about this at length, even perhaps with other folks on this podcast, but we know that by the time they're taking sales calls, by the time they're, filling out RFPs, the consideration set is basically locked. So sure, like occasionally you might break in as a fourth option, but you're like fighting an uphill battle. That the real work is happening in the 95%, the time when buyers aren't actively shopping. So that really, it just validates the 95-5 rule. Like, only 5% of your buyers are in market. We have to be thinking about that future customer base. It also means, like, when we talk about evenness, so the way that you show up. So it means you need continuous, consistent presence. So of like running a big campaign, disappearing for 6 months, and then running another campaign, we have to recognize that memory actually decays. So if you're not consistently refreshing your presence, someone else is. And when that buying situation finally triggers, they're going to be on the short list and you won't be. So there's that, going back to this principle of meaningful investment in brand building, not just demand generation, that activates the in-market smaller group.
Yeah. But still, you get this situation where you're like, well, what about the leads? So what about today? I think there's a component that you guys, I think, came up with a cash flow funnel based off 595. Yeah. And I always look at that. Even yesterday, I was talking about it with somebody, and the time component is so critical in that I think the one thing that the traditional funnel does poorly is show the time. What the cash flow funnel does, I think, really well is shows the importance of doing stuff over time, because it's not just a snapshot where you're going to win today or lose. Like, it's a sustainability kind of play, and like a path to growth, not just a moment in time.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah. I think it serves a number of different purposes, because obviously we need to have the conversation about future demand and have everyone get on the same page about why that investment is so necessary. Just understanding the number of buyers out into the future. But absolutely, we also need to be adept at capturing the latent demand.
Yeah.
Part of the path there is, in this research, being easy to find, what I call it that last mile. How do we make it easier? How does marketing have more visibility? How does marketing smooth the path, create the lighted path to doing that more successfully, so that 95% brand and 95 brand investment doesn't get lost?
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to shift gears. Sorry, Mark, did you want to add one more?
No, go for it.
Something? Yeah. I want to shift gears into portfolio, because I think this one for me is really, really, really interesting. And early on, when we were kind of covering the three, you mentioned, you need to make sure you're selling a product that is effectively and efficiently addresses both current and future buyer needs. And when I think about that, it's really fascinating in the context that, well, first of all, to do that correctly, you need to merchandise that playbook, and merchandising it has really three parts. You cover decluttering, focus, and balance. Is clutter the biggest organizational barrier?
Yeah, this is why I was excited to talk about portfolio, because I think it is actually one of the most underestimated growth barriers. Yeah. And it comes from a place of like really good intentions. So like, we understand, but here's what happens. So B2B companies want to serve every possible customer need. So product teams need features for niche use cases. Sales team asks for custom SKUs to close specific deals. New product lines get added. Before you know it, like, you close your eyes and then you're like, wait, we have a portfolio of like 5 gajillion new products. Each has multiple tiers. Each has add-on modules. Each has like different configuration options. And I think where marketers are coming from is like, we believe we're being very customer centric by showing like all these different options. We have a solution for everyone. But what happens is like paralysis. Like I know that even my own shopping experience, sometimes I'm like, whoa, I just can't figure out what I need. Yeah. It's like nearly impossible to navigate a website like that.
Yeah.
It's hard to compare. And, we human beings are still operating with the same operating system from the Stone Age. There's not like a 2.0 version. So we have to remember that the cognitive load is so overwhelming that people will go to a competitor with just a simpler option. So that is absolutely a barrier to growth, not because you have like too many products necessarily, but because of the work that buyers need to do to figure out what's right for them. So in the report, we have like a playbook to help you work through that. So decluttering by ruthlessly eliminating products that don't deliver meaningful revenue or strategic values. There's like a long tail of offerings that consume disproportionate resources relative to the revenue that they're generating. So you want to kill those, or at least hide them from navigation.
Skip slide.
Skip balance is number 2. So you still need innovation to attract attention and signal you're a category leader. This is where like a B2C example, we call it the Oreo strategy. So they have like their core Oreo, but they're constantly making like fun new Oreo varieties, but they steer people back to the core product where the profit lives. And then the final thing is clutter. So it's not just like an aesthetic issue, it's a conversion problem. It's a sales efficiency problem. So, we need to simplify so we can have people focus. And that's how you can unlock revenue that we're leaving on the table. It's actually, I think this is one of the first places you should go, actually, when you're thinking about taking on the learnings from this work.
I wanted to dig into, you talked a little bit about this before, like the category entry points and the product choices and all the options and, the featureitis and listing the products on the website and giving real estate to all kinds of different things. But can you talk a little bit about how to use sales data and merge that with category entry points so that it's a way of bridging marketing and sales together?
Right. Yeah. I mean, so I think it's understanding the buying situations helps you understand how to frame what the customer issue is. Like you're speaking their language. I think having a website where people are like, are they reading my mind? Are they like, that's where I think the goal is to get to a place where people go to the website and say like, I feel seen, my issue here, it's clear. And even if you have a sophisticated product suite, having just an incredibly clear path to like, this is me, this is my problem, and it's easy for me to get there. Well, there are a couple examples. So I'll cite here, Stripe. So they have a sophisticated product suite, but their core offering for most customers is super clear. Payment processing that just works. And their website merchandising guides you based on your business type rather than overwhelming you with features. So it's just good to do a sanity check. Like just common sense, go to the site and think, like, how does this land with me? Does this make sense? Am I speaking to the most common buying situations? And I think it also starts with understanding what those might be. So maybe even like thinking about, you could do a study where you can understand, where am I most credible? What are the most common things that come up where we can be competitive and commercially viable? You could, understanding that, then go down the path, but you can also talk to your salespeople and to understand, like, what are they saying? What are they hearing? Are the most common things? Repeat back to the customer in their own words and terms. I think that's like a good place to start unraveling that challenge.
Yeah. So there's this idea of like, I think there's an organizational design or behavioral component to actually implementing this that probably isn't, maybe for another topic for another time. But to change that, it's so fundamental to have product feature benefits.
Yeah.
on a website and not starting with the customer, which is what are my problems, and then leaning into the solution is the product, and here's the features and benefits. It's almost always the opposite, like product led and not customer led.
That part, and it requires real work. You need to research and document those actual situations that trigger demand in the category. Then you need to map them to the portfolio. Then you need to redesign your customer experience around how buyers think, not how you're organized internally. So I think that's the trap. Mm-hmm. It's very easy to fall into that trap working inside any company.
It's funny because my mind went to a similar place, Mark, but then I was trying to solution digitally to say, okay, wait, if I need to simplify, say, my on-page experience, and you're working back from the product to make that really clean for the potential buyer to come in to source the information that they need, then I would argue, then how do you put these pieces together internally to help reflect that, to reduce that friction even on the inside? Yeah, so I feel like it's a little bit of both, but you have to, again, if you're simplifying the journey to make you more discoverable, then I would argue your organization needs to be reflected somehow that internally as well.
I couldn't agree more. When you do it well, your conversion rates should go. You're reducing friction. You're probably reducing friction internally. Like probably some of the same that your buyers are having. Your people internally are struggling, but you can help people find what they need quickly.
Yeah,
they can understand why it's right for them, and help them move forward with confidence. So also validate the decision they made. Like thinking about all of those things is I think a huge game-changing thing to invest in.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that.
Hi. So many things are going through my mind. This is awesome. Thank you. Maybe there's a couple of things. Maybe we can talk about the power of and a little bit, and then jump in. We don't have that much time left with you. So I wanted if we can just brush on the and part, and then V maybe get into some of the takeaways. Hey,
yeah, let's do it.
I think there's. I'll start with, we had Ari Tennyson Jaya, if I pronounced it right. I hope I did. Yeah,
he's coming for you.
All right, yeah, from the B2B Institute on, and so a long time, well, probably last year or two.
From Ehrenberg and Bass.
Ehrenberg Bass Institute. Sorry, my mistake. So he's an expert in physical availability, but he said this thing that I just think is so interesting, which was the physical availability is meant to harvest mental availability. And so you're doing a lot of work in building mental availability, and the physical availability is the thing that's kind of another analogy, the harvesting machine that is able to take advantage of that. So if someone wants to remember your brand, but they can't figure out how to buy from you, you've talked a little about this. The customers a lot of times will satisfy and then pick the thing that's just there. And you talked about, the experience that you sometimes are just building memory or building the opportunities for your competitors. How common is this kind of a problem?
Yeah. So I think he's on point with it, and it's actually shockingly common. It's, I think, one of the biggest sources of wasted marketing investment. So, again, we've talked about all the work that goes into building mental availability. And then a buying situation triggers, like if you're a company that needs a new solution, brand comes to mind, all that mental availability is working. But then as we've started to lay out, they go to their website, can't figure out what product is right, navigation's confusing, all those things. Or they want to talk to sales. There's no sales coverage in the region. Contact us form, trade show, all the peers are evaluating options. You're not there. So what happens is they will satisfy. So they're defaulting to a competitor who's easier to find and buy from, not because they have better mental availability. Maybe the buyer actually would prefer you, but made it too hard. And in B2B buying is already hard enough. So people pass the path of least resistance, and it's incredibly common, and it's expensive because we paid a lot for all the brand impressions, all the awareness building. And then it's again, planting all the seeds and then not showing up for the harvest. And this is why we're so, we're finally, I think, putting the other side of the coin to make sure that people understand these two things have to work together. It's not either or. It's not mental or physical. It's mental,
Right.
physical. We have not finished our job if we're not looking at how we're converting all that brand equity into revenue.
Right.
It makes me like, I get excited about this in part because you just mentioned the ROI component and like the returns you're getting. It now takes the idea that marketing as an investment is just the advertising, and it now includes all kinds of things. And so we're giving a more realistic picture of the combined effort that needs to happen across mental and physical availability in order to get that ROI. Because if we're just measuring the ads, like it's not enough because there's dozens of other factors that are at play.
Yeah. I think the ROI conversation is definitely key. And I think physical availability is a great conversation for us to have to get at what matters. Because I do think that traditional ROI formulas gives marketing credit or blame for outcomes that are actually influenced by dozens of factors that marketing is not controlling. Think about, product quality, pricing, sales execution, customer service, competitive moves, economic conditions. All these things affect whether marketing investments convert into revenue, but marketing gets measured as if we're operating in a vacuum.
Right.
So I think that physical availability changes this conversation because it forces marketing to take responsibility for some of those other factors. Not all of them, but the ones that we influence. So for example, presence. Are we in the right channels? Do we have the coverage we need? This requires you to partner with sales on channel strategy, not just like run campaigns and like pray the sales, convert them. And prominence, are we standing out? Do we have distinctive assets? So that requires coordination with brand and product and creative. And then portfolio, are we shoppable? Can buyers figure out what to buy? So that requires you to have a voice in product strategy and also website merchandising. So for any CMO now, like this impacts how you actually think about your team and your budget. It requires that cross-functional orchestration. It requires you can't just manage your team in a silo. Now to go have strategic planning with sales, product, finance, where you're jointly accountable for those decisions, portfolio strategy. And then second, the budget allocation needs to reflect both mental and physical availability. So you might allocate 60, 70% to building mental availability, all the brand campaigns, content, all the things that you're doing. But you should also think about maybe 30%, 40% to physical availability, website merchandising, new channels, sales enablement tools. Improving your presence on review sites. So there's just a conversation that we need to have about new KPIs, share of voice, website conversion. Are people able to find and buy? So there's so much more to do in terms of getting the right conversation when it comes to our on deck for marketers.
Yeah, there's one quick question I want to squeeze in because that's some incredible practical advice here for marketers. But if there's one question a B2B marketer should be asking themselves this week to diagnose whether they have a physical availability problem, whether their physical availability problem is their growth bottleneck. Is there anything else that you think that they should be asking themselves?
So here's the question to ask. If a buyer in our category suddenly needs our solution tomorrow, how many different ways could they find and buy from us? And how does that compare to our biggest competitor?
Right.
So then really walk through that situation. Start to map out the actual buyer journey. So they search for category terms. Do you show up? Does your competitor show up? They ask colleagues for recommendations. Is your brand the one that comes to mind or your competitors? They go to a review site like G2. Are you there? Or is your competitor dominating that space? They attend an industry conference. Are you exhibiting or just your competitor? They look for a sales rep. Is there coverage? So you kind of go through this honest exercise. And so if you do that, honestly, you might find significant gaps, like places where your competitor is, where you're not, where your competitor, you go to their website, has easier merchandising than you. Those gaps are your growth bottleneck.
Yeah.
Because even if you've built strong mental availability, as we said before, your competitor can harvest the demand you created. One follow-up question, what's the one channel or element of physical availability where we're weakest? And what would it take to close that gap in the next 90 days? And I would also advise, like, this isn't something you can do overnight. No. Don't try to fix everything at once. Pick the biggest gap, start to make meaningful progress, and that's how you start unlocking the growth.
So good.
This is awesome, Ty. Thanks
so good
for this. How can people find out more about you and the work? And we'll put links into the report and everything. But what can people do to get more involved and invested in the kinds of work you're doing?
Well, thanks so much for having me. This was I really enjoyed the conversation. Guess what? The best place to find me is LinkedIn.
Wow.
Never heard of it. No,
easiest place. I am pretty active there. I share a lot about the research we're doing at the B2B Institute. Just search for Ty Heath there. We also have a dedicated page on LinkedIn for the B2B Institute, and then b2binstitute.org. All of our research is free. It's available for download. No form to fill out.
Yeah, I love that, by the way.
Like accessible and actionable. So read it, tell us what you think about it. And I can't wait to see how folks start to test this work out in their businesses.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Ty.
Thanks, Ty.
Love it.
You.
If you like this show, please leave a review. And even if you didn't, we'd love to make this show better, and your feedback will help us do that.